Daniel Harper felt the change before he understood it, like the air had shifted around him. That Thursday evening in Chicago was supposed to be simple. He had left his accounting office early for the first time in months, ignoring the stack of files on his desk because he wanted to surprise his wife. Emily had been working long hours at her downtown marketing firm, and lately their conversations had become short and practical, about bills, groceries, meetings, deadlines. Daniel missed the way she used to laugh at small things, the way she used to call him just to say she loved him. So he made a decision on impulse. He would take her to Bella Roma, the little Italian restaurant where they had celebrated their first anniversary. He remembered the red candles, the way she held his hand across the table, promising they would always protect what they had. On his drive downtown, the city lights reflected against the windshield, and he allowed himself to feel hopeful. He imagined her surprise when she saw him, the soft smile, maybe even a hug that lasted longer than usual. He even practiced the words in his mind. "I miss us." Emily had texted him that morning saying she would be late again because of an important client meeting. Daniel told himself that hard work was part of success, and he had always supported her ambition. He admired how driven she was. Still, something inside him had been unsettled for weeks. New dresses hanging in the closet, a different perfume, more mentions of her boss, Ryan Caldwell, how smart he was, how confident, how he believed in her talent. Daniel had met Ryan once at a company dinner. The man was polished, charming, the kind of leader people naturally followed. Daniel had shaken his hand and felt strangely small, though he couldn't explain why. He brushed off that feeling at the time. Now, as he parked near Emily's glass office building, that memory returned quietly. He checked his phone. No reply to his message about dinner. "She's busy," he told himself. He stepped out into the cold air, straightened his coat, and walked inside the lobby. The building was modern and bright, with tall ceilings and shining floors that reflected every movement. A security guard nodded politely. Daniel gave Emily's name and said he would wait. He planned to call her down and surprise her face to face. As he stood near the seating area, he looked around at young professionals walking quickly, laughing in small groups, talking about projects and weekend plans. For a moment, he felt out of place in his simple navy jacket and tired eyes. Then he saw her. Emily stood near the elevators, her back slightly turned toward him. Her hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and she was wearing a fitted cream coat he had never seen before. She looked confident, glowing in a way that caught his attention immediately. Daniel felt pride first. "That's my wife," he thought. Then he noticed she wasn't alone. Ryan stood beside her, closer than necessary. They were talking quietly, their heads tilted toward each other. Emily laughed. A soft, genuine laugh Daniel had not heard at home in months. Ryan said something else, and this time his hand rested gently on her lower back. It wasn't a quick, accidental touch. It lingered with comfort, with familiarity. Emily didn't step away. She didn't look uncomfortable. Instead, she looked at him with warmth in her eyes. The kind of warmth Daniel used to see when she looked at him. Everything inside Daniel went still. The lobby noise faded into a distant hum. He felt rooted to the floor, unable to move, unable to look away. His mind searched for simple explanations. Maybe it was harmless. Maybe this was normal in her corporate world. But deep down, he knew the difference between professional courtesy and personal closeness. This was not a congratulatory handshake. This was something softer, something growing. Ryan leaned slightly closer as if sharing a private joke. Emily touched his arm lightly when she laughed again. That small gesture cut deeper than any loud argument ever could. Daniel's throat tightened. He suddenly became aware of how foolish he must look, standing there with hopeful eyes and empty hands. He had come to surprise her with love, and instead he was watching a moment he was never meant to see. As if sensing something, Emily's gaze lifted and locked onto his. Her smile faded instantly. Color drained from her face. Ryan followed her line of sight and turned. For one brief second, the three of them were connected in a silent triangle of realization. Daniel saw shock in her eyes, guilt, fear. Ryan's hand dropped quickly from her back, his posture straightening. his expression shifting into calm professionalism. But it was too late. The truth had already spoken. Daniel's heart pounded, yet his body felt strangely calm, as if he had stepped outside himself. He didn't shout, he didn't storm forward, he simply stood there, absorbing the image that would replay in his mind for nights to come. Emily took a small step forward. "Daniel?" she said, her voice thin, uncertain. He noticed how different she sounded. No longer laughing, no longer light, just startled. In that single moment, Daniel understood that whatever had been building between them at home, the distance, the silence, the polite conversations, had roots he could now see clearly. He wasn't imagining the shift. He wasn't insecure or paranoid. Something had changed, and he had just witnessed proof of it. People walked past, unaware of the quiet heartbreak unfolding in the center of the lobby. Daniel felt exposed, like everyone could read the scene on his face. He had come to reconnect, to fix what felt fragile. Instead, he stood there realizing he might already be too late. And as the elevator doors opened beside Emily and Ryan, Daniel felt the first sharp wave of humiliation wash over him, cold and undeniable, because the woman he loved was looking at another man in a way she no longer looked at him. The silence in the lobby felt heavier than any argument could have been, and Daniel forced himself to walk forward, even though every step felt unreal, like he was moving through water. Ryan was the first to recover. He adjusted his suit jacket, gave a polite, controlled smile, and extended his hand as if this were a normal business moment. Daniel looked at the hand for a second before shaking it, his grip firm but brief. "Daniel Harper," Ryan said smoothly, as though they had not met before. "We were just wrapping up a long day. Emily did excellent work on the Hamilton account." His tone was confident, practiced, the voice of a man used to leading conversations. Daniel nodded once. "I see," he replied quietly, his eyes shifting to Emily. She looked nervous now, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, something she always did when she didn't know what to say. "I didn't know you were coming," she said, almost apologetically. "I texted," Daniel answered, keeping his voice calm. She glanced at her phone quickly, as if hoping she had missed it by accident. Ryan stepped slightly aside but stayed close enough to hear every word. "Big win tonight," Ryan added. "We stayed late to celebrate the team effort." The word celebrate echoed in Daniel's mind, but he didn't react. He refused to give the lobby a scene. Employees were still walking by, some slowing down just enough to sense the tension. Daniel felt their curiosity like a spotlight. "Can we talk outside?" Emily asked softly, her eyes pleading. Daniel looked at Ryan, who checked his watch in a subtle gesture that suggested he had somewhere more important to be. "I'll head out," Ryan said. "Emily, great work again. We'll discuss next steps tomorrow." His gaze lingered a fraction too long before he turned toward the elevator. Daniel noticed every detail, the relaxed confidence, the way Ryan seemed unbothered, as if nothing serious had happened. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime. For a split second, Ryan and Daniel made eye contact. It wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't innocent either. Then Ryan stepped inside. The doors began to close. Emily watched them shut, and Daniel saw a flicker of something in her expression. Conflict, maybe regret. When the elevator sealed completely, the lobby felt quieter but not lighter. "Daniel, please," she said, stepping closer. "It's not what you think." He let out a slow breath. "Then tell me what I should think." His voice was steady, but his chest felt tight. She hesitated, glancing toward the security desk, aware of their public setting. "Let's go outside," she repeated. Daniel followed her through the revolving doors into the cold evening air. The wind brushed against them, sharp and sobering. Cars passed on the busy Chicago street, their headlights flashing between them like brief interruptions. Emily wrapped her coat tighter around herself. "You came all the way here?" she asked. "I wanted to take you to dinner," Daniel said. He kept his hands in his pockets to stop them from shaking. "I thought we could spend time together." Her expression softened for a moment. "You didn't have to do that." "I wanted to." The space between them felt unfamiliar, like they were two coworkers discussing a project instead of husband and wife. "Ryan and I were just talking," she said carefully. "He congratulated me, that's all." Daniel looked at her directly. "Does he always stand that close when he congratulates you?" She blinked, clearly unprepared for the question. "You're overthinking it." He gave a small, humorless smile. "Am I?" She sighed, frustration mixing with guilt. "You don't understand how intense work has been. We've been pushing hard for this account. When it finally closed, everyone was relieved." "Everyone?" he asked. She paused again. That pause spoke louder than words. A taxi pulled up near the curb, then drove away when no one moved toward it. The city noise filled the silence between them. Daniel felt two emotions fighting inside him, anger and heartbreak, but he chose control. "I'm not here to embarrass you," he said quietly. "I just need honesty." Emily's eyes shimmered under the streetlights. "There's nothing physical," she said quickly. "Nothing happened." He studied her face, searching for certainty. "That's not what I asked," he replied. She swallowed hard. "We've been working closely for months. He believes in my ideas. He pushes me. It feels good to be recognized." "And at home?" Daniel asked. The question wasn't loud, but it carried weight. She looked down at the sidewalk. "At home we've both been busy," she said. "We barely talk about anything real anymore." Daniel felt the truth land between them. He couldn't deny it. Late nights, short conversations, routine replacing romance. But seeing her with Ryan had turned a quiet problem into something sharp and visible. "So, what is this?" he pressed gently. "A friendship? A crush?" She shook her head, but slowly. "I don't know," she admitted. "It just happened. I didn't plan it." The honesty hurt more than denial would have. Daniel felt the humiliation again. Not loud, not explosive, but deep. He imagined how it must have looked from the outside. A husband walking into a scene already in motion, arriving too late to understand when things started to shift. "Do you have feelings for him?" he asked. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them. "I'm confused," she said. That word echoed in his mind. Confused meant something had begun. Confused meant lines were blurred. The wind grew colder, but neither of them moved. Daniel realized he had two choices in that moment: react with anger or stay steady. He chose steadiness. "I deserve the truth," he said, "even if it's messy." Emily nodded slowly, tears forming but not falling. "I never meant for you to find out like this," she whispered. That sentence confirmed more than she intended. Daniel felt his last bit of denial disappear. He had walked into something real, something fragile but dangerous, a bond forming outside their marriage, even if it had not crossed clear boundaries. The elevator ride Ryan had taken alone now felt symbolic, separate paths beginning to form. Daniel looked at his wife, the woman he had built a life with, and saw how far apart they had drifted without noticing. "We need to talk at home," he said finally. She agreed. They stood there for a second longer, not touching, not reaching for comfort. Then they walked toward their cars separately, the city lights shining around them, both understanding that the short elevator moment in that lobby had changed everything, and that whatever came next would require more honesty than either of them had shown in a long time. Daniel drove home with both hands tight on the steering wheel, the city lights fading behind him as questions filled the quiet space inside his car. And when he pulled into the driveway of their suburban home, he sat there for a full minute before stepping out, trying to prepare himself for a conversation he never imagined having. Inside, the house looked the same as always: family photos on the wall, the soft lamp glowing in the living room, the faint scent of the candle Emily liked to light in the evenings. But it no longer felt warm. It felt like a place waiting for answers. And when Emily walked in a few minutes later, closing the door gently behind her, they stood facing each other without knowing how to begin. She placed her purse on the table slowly, as if delaying the moment, while Daniel leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her carefully, noticing how tired she looked beneath her makeup, how unsure her posture seemed, And for the first time, he realized this wasn't just about one evening in a lobby. It was about months of distance they had both ignored. "We can't pretend this is nothing," Daniel said quietly, breaking the silence, and Emily nodded because she knew he was right. She moved to the dining chair and sat down, folding her hands together, her voice softer now, stripped of the professional confidence she carried at work, and she admitted that somewhere along the long hours and shared meetings, she had begun to feel seen by Ryan in a way that excited her ambition, that made her feel important and admired, feelings she hadn't felt strongly in a while at home. Daniel listened without interrupting, even when the words hurt, because deep down he wanted truth more than comfort. She explained how it started small: compliments about her ideas, encouragement during stressful deadlines, late-night project calls that slowly became conversations about dreams and fears. And she insisted nothing physical had happened, no clear boundary had been crossed. But she could not deny that something emotional had begun forming, something she hadn't fully stopped. Daniel felt a mix of pain and responsibility rise in his chest, because he knew their marriage had slipped into routine, mornings rushed, evenings quiet, weekends spent catching up on chores instead of connection. And while he had believed stability was enough, Emily had been longing for passion and attention, not luxury or drama, just the feeling of being deeply noticed. "Why didn't you tell me you were unhappy?" he asked, his voice steady but heavy, and she looked at him with tears finally falling, saying she didn't even understand her own feelings at first, that she thought it was just work stress, that she kept telling herself it would pass, but every time Ryan praised her or shared a joke only they understood, it felt like a spark she hadn't felt in years. Daniel felt humiliated remembering the lobby, yet he also saw clearly now that the real damage had grown quietly over time, fed by silence and assumptions. He confessed that he had been exhausted from trying to provide security, that he thought paying bills on time and keeping their life stable was proof of love, that he assumed Emily knew how much he cared even if he didn't say it often, and she replied that she did know, but sometimes knowing wasn't the same as feeling it daily. The conversation moved quickly, emotions rising and falling like waves, but neither of them shouted. Neither blamed harshly, because beneath the hurt there was still respect. Emily admitted she liked the attention, liked feeling admired, and that scared her because she never wanted to become someone who betrayed trust. Yet she also felt torn between comfort and excitement. Daniel absorbed every word, realizing that temptation had entered not because their marriage was worthless, but because it had become predictable and quiet. He walked to the living room window, staring into the dark backyard, thinking about the life they had built, the holidays, the road trips, the late-night talks when they were newly married, and he wondered when those simple joys had been replaced by silence. Emily followed him and stood a few feet away, not touching him, giving him space, and she said softly that seeing his face in the lobby had shocked her awake, that the hurt in his eyes made her understand how close she was to losing something real for something uncertain. Daniel turned to her and asked the hardest question yet. "Do you want to stay married to me?" And she didn't hesitate this time. She said yes, but she admitted that wanting to stay was not enough without change. They both understood that trust had cracked, not shattered completely, but damaged enough to require effort. Daniel felt anger rise briefly, not at Ryan alone, but at the situation, at himself for not noticing earlier, at the slow drift neither of them had addressed. Yet he chose to focus on what could be repaired instead of what had already hurt. They sat back down at the dining table, talking for hours, discussing counseling, clearer boundaries at work, intentional time together. And while nothing was magically fixed that night, something important happened. They were honest without hiding behind pride. Emily promised she would step back from any personal closeness with her boss, keeping interactions strictly professional, and Daniel promised he would stop assuming love could survive without daily attention. The house felt different by midnight. Not lighter exactly, but clearer, like a storm had passed and left the air sharp but breathable. As they prepared for bed, choosing separate rooms for the night to give space, Daniel lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the lobby image again, yet now it carried context instead of pure shock. He understood that humiliation alone could not guide his next steps. Only truth could. In the guest room, Emily cried quietly, not from fear of being caught, but from realizing how easily emotional distance can grow between two people who once felt inseparable. That night marked the turning point, not because the pain disappeared, but because they finally named it. And in doing so, they faced the fragile distance between them with open eyes, knowing the future of their marriage would depend not on who had admired whom, but on whether they were willing to rebuild what had slowly been fading for far too long. Winter settled quietly over their neighborhood, and with it came a different kind of silence inside the Harper home. Not the cold silence of avoidance, but the careful silence of two people trying to rebuild something fragile. Weeks passed after that long night of honesty, and Daniel and Emily moved through their days with intention, scheduling counseling sessions, setting small rules like no phones at dinner and honest check-ins before bed. And though the pain had not vanished, it no longer controlled every moment. Emily kept her promise at work, drawing firm professional lines with Ryan, limiting conversations to meetings, declining private celebrations, and when he once suggested staying late alone to prepare a pitch, she calmly insisted the team be present, and that single choice gave her a quiet strength she had been missing. Daniel noticed the effort, not in dramatic speeches, but in daily actions, and while trust did not instantly return, respect slowly did. Some nights were still heavy, especially when memories of the lobby surfaced in Daniel's mind, the image sharp and unwelcome. But instead of burying it, he spoke about it in therapy, admitting the humiliation he felt, the fear of not being enough. And Emily listened without defense, understanding that healing required patience. They began to rediscover small pieces of each other, cooking together on Sundays, walking through the park even in the cold, laughing over old photos they found while cleaning the attic. And in those simple moments, Daniel saw glimpses of the woman he fell in love with, not the ambitious executive admired by others, but the thoughtful partner who once believed in their shared dreams. One snowy evening, as flakes fell softly outside their dining room window, Emily prepared dinner while Daniel set the table, and there was a quiet comfort in the routine, not dull but steady. And after they sat down, Emily looked at him with a seriousness that made him pause. "I've been thinking a lot," she said, her voice calm yet emotional, and Daniel waited, feeling the weight of whatever came next. She told him she had asked her company to shift her reporting structure, requesting a different supervisor to create distance from Ryan, a move that might slow her promotion but would protect their marriage, and Daniel felt something shift inside him. Not pride exactly, but gratitude, because this was a clear choice, not just words. "Why would you risk that?" he asked gently, and she answered without hesitation. "Because I don't want a career built on confusion. I want a life built on certainty." And those words settled deeply between them. Daniel reached across the table, this time without doubt, and took her hand, feeling the warmth of her fingers wrap around his. And though forgiveness was still a journey, willingness had returned. They spoke openly that night about attraction, about how human emotions can wander when attention fades, but they agreed that marriage was less about never noticing others and more about deciding where to place loyalty. Emily admitted she had been drawn to the validation, the spark of being admired daily, but she now understood that real love was quieter, built on history, sacrifice, and shared growth. Daniel admitted he had hidden behind responsibility, assuming providing stability was enough, and promised to show affection not just through duty but through words and presence. The snow outside thickened, covering the yard in white, and it felt symbolic, not erasing what happened, but offering a clean surface to step forward on. Over the next months, change became visible in small ways. Daniel surprising Emily with lunch at her office. Not to monitor but to connect, Emily leaving work earlier when possible, both protecting date nights like important meetings. Sometimes doubt still whispered, especially on days when Emily came home tired and distant. But instead of letting fear grow, Daniel asked questions calmly and she answered honestly, understanding that secrecy had once been the seed of their problem. One afternoon in early spring, Daniel received a message from Emily. "Dinner tonight? My treat." It was simple, but it carried effort. And when they met at the same Italian restaurant where they had once celebrated their first anniversary, there was no dramatic music or grand declarations, just two people sitting across from each other, choosing to try again. They spoke about future plans, maybe traveling more, maybe starting the family they once postponed. And for the first time in a long while, the conversation felt hopeful instead of tense. The memory of the lobby had not disappeared. It likely never would, but it no longer defined them. It became a turning point instead of an ending. Trust rebuilt slowly, like bricks placed one at a time. Each honest talk another layer, each kept promise another foundation. Daniel realized that humiliation could have hardened him, could have pushed him toward resentment, but instead it forced him to confront the cracks in their marriage that both had ignored. Emily realized that admiration from others was temporary, but partnership built over years carried depth no quick spark could match. On a warm evening months later, they sat on their back porch watching the sunset, and Daniel noticed how naturally Emily leaned against him, not out of habit but comfort, and he wrapped his arm around her shoulders, feeling no tension in the gesture. "Thank you for staying," she whispered softly, and he replied, "Thank you for choosing to." And in that exchange, there was understanding that love is not perfect, it is chosen daily. Their story did not become flawless, arguments still happened, stress still returned, but they faced it together instead of separately, aware now of how easily distance can grow if left unattended. The humiliation that once burned so sharply became a quiet reminder of what nearly slipped away, and rather than haunting them, it strengthened their commitment to protect what they had. As the sun disappeared and the sky darkened, Daniel realized something important. Marriage is not about avoiding every storm. It is about standing together when the wind rises. And on that porch, with Emily's hand resting in his, he felt certain that while the future would bring challenges, they had learned how to fight for each other instead of drifting apart. And that choice, made again and again, was what truly saved them.